Gender Parenting and Family Structures in the U.S. by Samantha Buglowitz. The purpose of this research I conducted is to analyze how traditional views of the American nuclear family no longer fit into the modern mainstream Americans' lives. I also answer the question of how do gender differences or similarities between parents affect family structure, roles, and parenting styles. These new types of family structures emerging have serious social implications in regard to gender roles within households, and research is showing that these new family structures are moving away from traditionally defined gender roles and display the fact that there is not just one way to raise a family successfully. The countries that are cross-culturally examined focus mostly on the mainstream American society, but also entail the Israeli Agrarian Collective Society, and briefly households in South Wales. Before discussing these new family structures, we must first define what the nuclear family is. The nuclear family, defined by Spiro in the American Anthropology Journal, states that it is a social group characterized by common residence, economic cooperation, and reproduction. It includes adults of both sexes, at least two of whom maintain a socially approved sexual relationship, and one or more children, owned or adopted, of the sexually cohabitating adults. These strict parameters of what defines a family, especially in the United States, no longer fits into the complex lifestyles of mainstream America. New family structures are emerging, such as the single-parented home and same-sex parented home. We see in the U.S. that the typical family that is thought to be the standard is no longer the norm. In the U.S., divorce rates skyrocket to top the charts at 50%, as well as the amount of same-sex cohabitating couples rising to 601,209 in the 2000 census. In the U.S., the struggle to adapt to these new family structures is apparent. Many people argue that families with single parents as well as same-sexed parents are not successful in raising children. The idea that a child needs a male parent and a female parent is no longer applicable to the modern-day American. Studies by Bibb Lars and the American psychologist explicate in his study, Deconstructing the Essential Father, that by way of the constructionist perspective, it is stated that successful parenting is not gender-specific and that children do not need fathers, or mothers either for that matter. Rather, any gender configuration of adults could parent well. The study comes to this conclusion because of the fact that they see that single fathers also displayed some maternal capacities that seemed to remain latent in married dads when women were around to provide them. The study shows that men and women alike can parent alone or with only one gender present in the child's life. With gender differences making no visible change in the rearing of children, we must look to other variables that define a successful family. The idea of marriage followed by cohabitation leading to a successful family is a very traditional view, and it was the defining factor for a family in the past. Presently, though, this is not the case. Here we look to Israel's Agrarian Collective Society, also known as the kibbutz, where couples cohabitate before marriage. The request for a room, then, is the sign that they wish to become a couple, aka zug, the term the kibbutz has substituted for the traditional marriage. This union does not require the sanction of a marriage ceremony or of any other event. This can be compared to the contemporary American society in that many people cohabitate but do not get married and are still considered a family. This is also similar in same-sex couples that decide to parent because as of now there is no law that allows them to get married, so they partake in unions, which like zug takes the place of a marriage ceremony but entails all the bonds and social implications of a marriage. While gender roles in some cultures are seemingly disappearing, in South Wales we see gender roles and the traditional roles of women still expressed in marriages. In South Wales, these gender roles are socially constructed, thus displaying the feminism theoretical approach. A participant in the study titled, "It's a Pleasure to Cook for Him, Food, Meal Times, and Gender in Some South Wales Households" by Anne Murcott, stated that, "When my husband comes home, there's nothing more he likes, I think, than coming in the door and smelling a nice meal cooking. I think it's awful when someone doesn't make the effort. I think, well, if I was a man, I'd think I'd get really fed up with if my wife never bothered." These ideas that women need to please the man or that men need to be the breadwinners in the family are outdated and no longer fit into the modern societies we live in, specifically the United States. Themes displayed in my analysis are looking at gender as not being the defining characteristic in a family, but a parent's ability to stay continually involved in their children's lives, as well as stable employment. The theme that gender is not an issue leads into another theme of marriage not being as strong as it used to be. We see the trend of single-parented families rising, with divorce rates rising as well, and also in research about Israel's agrarian collective society, it is visible that marriage does not define a family. There is a theme of equality among men and women when raising children. These themes and the research presented here allow people to look at the idea of family in a new way. Many people still think that family consists of a mother and a father and their children. Today in mainstream America, we see that there are many different ways to successfully raise a family and be able to see the positives of each different family structure. It allows us to move away from the ethnocentric view that the traditional nuclear family is the only way to successfully raise children. The research outlined here allows us to better understand that these new emerging family structures are here to stay and will only become more successful with time and more widely accepted through education. The perspectives used in the research are a feminist perspective. As defined by Dr. Dilley, the feminist perspective asserts that gender and gender identities are socially constructed in relationships that are typically unexamined. Feminist studies call for the examination of all things gender to explain how gender roles and identities are constructed, reproduced, negotiated, challenged, and changed. It is visible in my research that these feminist perspectives is adopted because gender, especially in relationships and families, can change and are changing before our eyes with the new family structures apparent in our society today. To conclude the research, we see that the nuclear family being the norm in our societies today are no longer true. We have an emergence of new family structures which now include not just heterosexual parents, but also same-sex parents and single parents. The idea that children raised in families by same-sex parents or single parents are doomed because of lack of having two genders present is unfounded. Research published in the Australian Psychological Society conducted by Elizabeth Short conjunctively states that parenting practices and children's outcomes in families parented by lesbian and gay parents are likely to be at least as favorable as those in families of heterosexual parents, despite the reality that considerable legal discrimination and inequity remain significant challenges for these families. These new family structures may be hard, but are successful. Gender no longer defines success in a family. Parental involvement and stable jobs and economic status help to foster a successful family and child upbringing. This research shows that there are ways other than traditional nuclear family to raise children successfully.